Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly Chan. I am the Community Relations and Public Service Manager here at CEB. CEB stands for Continuing Education of the Bar. We're a nonprofit program of the University of California, and we're so excited to bring you the Business of Law webinar series. Today, we'll hear from Muja Rahim on how to open a law firm practice on a small budget and work with automation tools. Muja is the owner and principal attorney of the law office of Muja Rahim in Walnut Creek. She exclusively practices family law and represents clients in all matters that pertain to family law. She was recently selected as a 2019 Rising Star Super Lawyer by Super Lawyers and was recently appointed by Contra Costa Board of Supervisors on Family and Children's Trust Committee, District 4. Welcome, Muja. We're so thankful to have you here with us today. Before we start today's presentation, if you have a question during the presentation, please chat your questions in. There is a chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to answer all questions as they come in. We'll also leave about 15 minutes or so at the end for questions. So I'm just going to turn it over to Muja.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who is listening to this. Feel free to ask any questions as we go. So just to kind of provide some context about myself, so I'm coming up on 5 years of having my own practice. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I still remember the struggles when I first began. And at this point, I can laugh at it, but I definitely thought that this is a conversation that should be had and it should be talked about. So just before I opened up my own practice, I was scared, but I knew it was the proper time. And I did everything that I could to ask questions of other solo attorneys or other mid-sized level firms. And the response was very interesting. I got some amazing advice and suggestions. There were some advice and suggestions that I thought were, a little bit out there, but in hindsight, I realized that, a lot of people weren't, or firms at that time or attorneys weren't familiar with how much technology can be utilized. So like, just to give you an example, I had an attorney tell me that I should advertise in the yellow pages, the book format, not even the online version. So, when you get advice from people, take some of it with a grain of salt, but even with those that it's not applicable, you should still listen to it and kind of gauge and, just like I said, take it with a grain of salt. Some people wouldn't even respond to me. If I reached out, it would just be quiet. And I will say one thing that I didn't know at the time, but I'm seeing it over the years of having my own practice, was people would tell me something, for instance, networking. At that time, my idea of networking was, okay, you go to all of these social events, you hand out your card, and then you do a follow-up email or, to meet up in person. But when I started doing that, I wasn't seeing the results. So for me, networking was this big question that I didn't know or even see what was coming out about it. So with that being said, that's just kind of my background. And I'll start with the first slide, which is before I began, initially, and this is not what they teach you in law school, I was thinking that a law firm is completely different from a regular business. We're selling, legal services. It's not like retail. But I quickly realized that before I even opened my doors, that I needed to treat it like a business, because it is a business and it's not, I'm selling legal services. That's what the retail, quote unquote, would be. So what I began with was my mission statement. And one thing I have to say is this is very key and vital. Like, you have to have a mission statement and don't think short term of, okay, well, I want to have like 5 associates. You want to think big picture, and that should be what your firm is at its core. And that goes to what's the purpose. It's not just, okay, this is my practice area. I practice, for instance, in my situation, family law. And it's not about, I want to make money. The reason that shouldn't be part of the purpose in your mission statement, because it's already implied in it, in your mission. No one opens up a business to say, okay, I don't want to make money. But if you know what your foundation is going to be and what you're selling, your business, how it's going to operate, it's going to really help guide you. With that being said, you should also set your mission statement with having goals and set those deadlines. You have to really be strong in accountability. It's really easy to fall off. Like if you say, okay, I'm going to, write a blog, you need to be consistent with it and not just slip and fall. Or if it gets busy, that kind of just goes untouched. And with everything, you should have an ROI, which is a return on investment, and that includes legal services. So how long it takes you to, for instance, prepare a dissolution, like a petition or a response, like you should be measuring things like that. And the reason I'm suggesting that is because your firm should offer multiple services. It shouldn't just be, okay, I'm going to just come onto your case, represent you from beginning to end, and that's it. You should offer limited scope consulting scenarios for your clients, because what you will see is a lot of clients might be hesitant and they want one of the services, but as they get to see your work, they will trust you and eventually hire you. But that's where they're on the fence. So that's why I highly recommend, having something where you can analyze everything that's going on in your business. Lastly is the policies and procedures. This is going to constantly change, because if you're doing your data analysis, you'll see what's working and what's not working. You shouldn't go into it thinking, well, this works for me, this is working and I'm seeing it, but you're not understanding why it's working. It's very important to understand why something is working, so then you can kind of build on that. And you're also going to see things where you're not seeing things that are working, and you're saying money is not being well spent there. One thing I also want to say at this point in time that I initially had a hard time in the beginning was knowing your value. So I worked at 2 nonprofits, so I had an idea of how long it took me to do certain paperwork, how long it took me, an estimate of being in court. But coming out of that, my hourly rate, I didn't have a big book of business, and I was kind of thinking, okay, if I have it lower, maybe that might attract people, but if I have it higher, then people will be a little bit hesitant to come in. And this is where I will say I was fortunate enough to talk to other, seasoned attorneys, not in my practice area, who kind of just, guided me through that thought process and kind of made me realize that if you don't value what your quote unquote hourly rate is, then no one else will. And you need to stand firm with that. So for the planning process tips, so as you've done your mission statement and, set some goals, it's very important to start the strategic planning. So for me, when I started, so opening up a law firm, you don't have to have much money. You already have the essential tools. You have your laptop. Now with cell phones and with apps where you can separate your business line from your personal cell, it's very cheap is what I'm going to say. I think the biggest purchase I made in the beginning was legal malpractice insurance, but I had a really small overhead cost when I started. I think my overhead cost in the beginning was $375 a month. That was, and anything else was, what I did was I put a portion in savings, because I knew that there would be some lean months or no clients, especially in the beginning. And then I put a portion another portion into another savings account of this is how I'm going to kind of save up to invest back into my business. So that was for me, my planning process. So because I knew it was going to be lean, or in the beginning, I knew I wouldn't have like a bunch of clients. And people's journeys are different. I know when I opened up, there were some attorneys who were working at firms who opened up their own practice, and a lot of clients went with them. So they were quickly growing. And for me, I had calls coming in from referrals from my previous employers, nonprofits. So, that wasn't a competition right there. So I had the calls coming in, but I think my problem was, the retention, because every step in your practice it needs to be strategically planned out from. And you need to kind of also distinguish when you're talking with someone or as you're in your practice, like facts from opinions and assumptions. So just because if you're starting off, don't, and if you see someone who started off at the same time as you, don't assume that they got this by doing something. You just don't know. Like I said in that example, someone coming from another firm who has clients is different from my scenario. And I think that's one key thing to remember. It's okay to go at your own pace, because eventually you're going to find what does work for you. And business, I'll say, whether it's legal or these big Fortune 500 companies, it's constantly evolving. So you don't want your business to be stagnant, especially with technology coming. It should be constantly changing, or you should always be on the lookout. So for instance, when I started, I used a lot of products are for free, but they have limited access. So those were the things that I did tap into. For instance, everyone has access to Google Drive. So I knew I wasn't going to spend at that time. So I used that free resources. If I wanted, like a task list that can integrate with my emails, I use something like Trello, which is for free. And I like the aesthetics for it. So one users, typically a lot of these companies allow you to use it for free. And then as you build and you have more, then you can go ahead and invest in it if it's something that you like. So that's what I want to say. Don't, put everything in writing and really measure it. I can't emphasize that enough, of measuring. And because if you don't, then you're really not knowing what you want to invest in and because there's a difference of what you really need and that you should immediately invest in versus something that it's cool and it might make your life easy, but it's really not worth it at this time. The other thing is, don't let fear prohibit or drive your decisions. So a lot of times things, can be scary. So don't be the voice in your head that's telling you, okay, maybe you haven't done a case like this. Maybe what you should do is not, refer it out. You have the tools, you have the resources, you can do the research and, pair up with someone, whatever it is, take on that case. Or if it's a business decision, whether you need to hire, take it on. Don't let fear prohibit you. Also, don't let it drive your decisions. And what I mean by that is, if you have a client who comes in and like a potential new client, and you see the red flags, then it's not worth taking it on. And sometimes referring those clients out might be, it's a saving grace. So with that being said, and when you're thinking as you're going through the strategic planning, definitely, in theory, it might sound good, but in reality, it might not be great. So be willing to toss it out and not spend any further time in it. So that's what you should be focusing on when you're looking at these analysis. Also, have realistic milestones and deadlines. So if you're starting, let's say you're in your second year, you say my goal is I want to make 100,000 for that year. Okay, so that's a broad goal. What is that? What are the steps that you need to take it down? So you need to break it into each month, and then you need to also consider: am I considering this after overhead cost or with overhead cost. And then when you break it down, you need to go break it down even simpler. So what am I going to do? Okay, so I'm going to go network and go meet with new people. I'm going to tap into the people I already know. So there's different processes, but the more tight you have it, the more it's going to come to fruition. So is there any questions? Oh, so I see someone that says Trello to track tasks. Yes, that's. So I'm going to pause here for a moment. Does anyone have any questions?
If you have any questions, please use the chat button and you can chat in your questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything right now. Thank you.
All right. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is procedures. Hold on, I think I see a question.
Yes, the question is, how do we measure ROI?
Okay, so there's different tools that you can use. So for instance, let's talk about a website. Okay, so when I first started, it took me a while, but I did my website and I linked it to Google Analytics. Google Analytics is for free. So that kind of allowed me to track my website, and the way that helped me, for instance, is when I would look at Google Analytics, I would see that a lot of people in foreign countries were tapping into my website versus in the United States. There was a smaller proportion. So then I had to kind of retweak it. So another thing that you can kind of measure, so when you have a client calling in or a potential new client, it's obvious you should say, okay, so how did you hear about me? But you would be surprised as to how many people don't really ask that. So every month, so if you're asking and you're being consistent, or if you're a receptionist at the time, because right now you have, virtual receptionists that can, you can pay them for what you want to tailor for when they call your firm. So every month you should kind of track it. So if you see, okay, so this is coming from my website, let's say at the end of the month there's 30 people calling from your website, maybe 40 are calling because someone referred you, or and 10 are maybe from like a past client, who's coming back. So you're going to kind of be able to gauge that. So in the beginning, what I did was, for that, I used Excel. Which is very tedious. Now I use a CRM, which basically tells me where everything is coming from. So if you want to know in terms of that starts from Excel, and then as you make more money and you can invest, you can use a CRM. Does that answer your question, or is there anything in specific you wanted to know about measuring ROI? Oh, so CRM that I'm currently using is Clio Grow. I started using Lexicata, but Clio went ahead and purchased them out. So they're in that transition. So that's what I'm using for my CRM. I know there's a bunch of other CRMs that other Fortune 500 companies use, such as Salesforce. But when I looked at that, there was a lot of bells and whistles, and in comparing the prices, I didn't think that would benefit me at all. So that's the CRM that I'm using and I like. And the reason I also like Clio Grow is because it integrates with Clio and all of the other softwares that I'm using. And then any other questions regarding CRM or ROIs? Go ahead and type it in. And then fee sharing and a good amount to offer. So the question is, will you be discussing fee sharing and a good amount to offer to a more experienced attorney when we bring someone to help us? So this is something, so I don't share my fees, but if I am gonna work with a more experienced attorney, I definitely will pay them, for instance, in the context of where they're helping me out. So, and what their hourly rate is, to be fair. But If it is someone who I'm contracting out like research with, I'm going to ask them what their hourly rate is. It's not going to be, so they're going to present it. If it's something that I agree with, then I will go ahead. For instance, I contracted one of my research before a trial, and their hourly rate that they offered was $60 an hour. And so for me, I needed to save time, so I gave basically I said, this is the amount that it should take you. So because I was always measuring my return on investments, I knew how long it should take to do that research, and then times it by their hourly rate, and we kind of came into that. So far, I haven't had to co-counsel, let's say, with an experienced attorney, so I really can't answer that. I think if you have a mentor, and you can kind of have that discussion, because I do think a lot of experienced attorneys do know that their hourly rate is probably a lot higher than what you have. And one thing I will say to that is never be afraid to ask. If that individual that you ask rejects you and says, no, this is what my hourly rate and I'm not, then you need to move on and you can ask around. Because I will say one thing that I found in the legal community is how many people are willing to help. But at the same time, you definitely will get, the door slammed in your face. But I think rejection is one thing that I've realized in business is the best thing to face, because the more you're turned down or the more you're rejected, if you have the grit and you still have the fighting power in you, you'll keep on continuing, because guess what? There will be plenty of other doors that do open up for you. So hopefully that answers your question. So I'm going to move on. So with procedures and systems, let me just kind of close this out. So, okay, so before I begin, let's see, okay. Sorry, I'm reading a question. Okay, so the question, I won't say your name, in regards to trial and co-chair, second chair. If you want, you can go ahead and call me or email me, and then if I have no problem with talking to you in person, and we can kind of further discuss that. Okay, so procedures and policies. Okay, so here's the thing about having procedures and policies. It's going to change over time. And the foundation is going to be your business plan, your goals, and your return on analysis is going to go ahead and be the driving force. So the first thing I want to let you guys know, and it's important if you can do this before you open your firm. If not, then as you're setting up your firm, because it is a trial and error situation, it's very important to have this procedure before you hire. And it should be in writing. So you want to have your firm being consistent, because your ultimate goal is you want to be able to go on vacation or step away and your firm is still running as how it is when you're there. So that's why it should be in writing, and it has to be implemented. So when the time comes to hire, or if it's not hiring, if it's to outsource out or contract out, whatever might be the case, it needs to be implemented. It can't be where, it's not consistent across the board. But also be flexible, because sometimes if you hire someone, contract out, or if you have a virtual receptionist, virtual paralegal, whatever might be the case, they might have a better style. And if you have to be open to it. So if it's something that makes sense to you and you see that it has cut basically, for instance, if you have a process of, like, let's say scanning and uploading it into your cloud. If it takes you 2 clicks to do it, but there's another way that will take you 1 click, that's going to cut down on time, and it's going to be a lot faster and efficient. If you like it and it works, implement it. If you don't, then that's fine too. But always, one thing I've realized is being open to any suggestions, anything that's new, because as you all know, technology keeps on changing and they're trying to make it so much easier and keep up to date on it. So without setting the tone, I will say you will lose money. It's the difference between what you're going to charge for. You want more billables versus, wasting time on admin. So for instance, something that I've seen is finding a document in your iCloud. So if you don't have a proper filing system for computers, then you're going to have either you or your staff is going to spend maybe a good 5 to 10 minutes looking for this one document. So that's why it's important to have a system that works for everyone and it's consistent. So I see a chat. Okay, never mind. That's not. Okay. So the next step, the next question is, okay. Sorry. So if you look at this next slide, so these are basically procedures and policies that I've put in that you should have. So basically it's in essence from the beginning of when a potential new client calls you, then the next step is having that consultation. And of course, this is within the context of family law, but they're very similar. It's a business. So then it's being retained, then it's communication, court, all of that stuff, and then it's the closing out. So if you look at this list that I have, everything with the exception of hours and operations, and opening and handle mail, that I'm not talking about email, but for mail and the holiday cards, though everything else is automated for me. So that's what I mean by integration and the software. I don't have to there's no extra steps. I have one system, it uploads into my other system, and then it just connects. So that's my hope. That's why it's so fast, because automation is key. And I'm going to talk about that at the next slide. So these are the software programs that are out there. You have your practice management, you have billing, you have accounting and payroll, you have forms. What I mean by forms is whatever questionnaires you might have for potential new clients, or you have the judicial counsel forms that they have. The key to this is integration. So whatever you have, for me, I don't like to have to go to different websites and log in and use different passwords. Mine has to be set up where I'm logging into one and everything else is integrated where it's uploaded into, for instance, my practice management, or I have two separate cloud storages. I have Dropbox for business, and then I have Google Drive. And for that, Google Drive is more for my templates and for further tweaking things. And then for Dropbox is for businesses for, other documents like my MCLEs and then my practice management I use the client portal. So anything that the client wants to have access to, anything that's been filed, anything from opposing counsel, it's there. They can easily access it. They don't have to look through their emails. There's not email back and forth. Everything is just in one centralized area, and it's a quick where you can easily pull things up. You can have communication without having to sort and go back through with email. And the other cool thing about it is you can easily time and put your bill in. So for me, billing is very important, and I capture it as I'm working. And the reason I do that is if I wait until later on that night, or if I do it at the end of the week, then you're going to lose on captured time. So as I'm doing it, it's automatically captured. Same thing with emails. As I upload it, if it's uploaded into client, I can automatically start the timer and then upload it, and it automatically, automates itself into the billing software. Okay, I have 2 questions. Okay. Yes, so to answer, so the question is, okay, so 2 questions. So which practice management or billing programs have you found to work best for you in family law? Like I said, I have Clio, and the reason, for me, Clio was the best because aesthetically it made sense. I know when I tried out Practice Panther, there was also My Case. and so that's the thing. You need to try, they have trials for them all. So if you, in the beginning, when you're looking, or even if you want to change because you don't like your current software, try out the trial practices. And if it works for you, then that's going to be something that you should go for. And when you're looking at practice managements, you should see what full potential it has. And you should know how to use it. If you don't know, then you're missing out on a lot. So for me, it's Clio because it also, integrates with Clio Grow, and it integrates with my Ruby Receptionist. And so it has so many integrations. Billing program is part of Clio. And it's easy. So it goes to that matter. For me, that's what's worked best for family law. And then the other question is, in the beginning, is it okay not to have programs like Clio, Practice Panther to save cost, or is the cost worth it? So what I will say to that is, I didn't start off with the practice management when I first started. I looked at the cost and I said, okay, and I looked at the volume of clients. And in the beginning, it was, I want to say, so when I first opened my doors, the first month I was getting calls and I had the free consultations, which that's a different topic right there. But I will say when I got it didn't make sense to pay for it. But as it picked up, what I do wish is, I wish I jumped on it sooner. So I think to answer that question is, see what your volume is like right now. And if you have, for instance, like 5, yeah, I think you should, the cost is worth it, I'll say. Because if you start building clients, let's say it's within like 2 months, if you're at 10, you're better off having that practice management software than waiting until you're at 20, because then you're going to have to re-input all that information. So what app do you use for your client portal? So I have Clio. So they have their own client portal, and basically I give them access to whatever I want. So for instance, I'll give them access to their documents and messaging. And then access to billing. So they have access to that. And so basically you set it up where you share it, and then the clients make up their own username and password, and they can log on, and whatever you've given them access to, that's what they will have access to. Okay. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. Bear with me. Okay, so as I said, when you're looking at case management, you want to know about automation, integration, and calendaring. Integration is so key. So the reason I say that is, it doesn't make sense to, for instance, to have something like Clio and then use something else, because the goal is you want to make your practice management your centralized point. Everything else needs to be connected to it. So then all you have to do is press one click and it goes up. For instance, if I have a client who has emailed me and I haven't set up their client portal yet, when I open my email, I literally just click on the Clio app on the email that I use, and it automatically uploads it into the messaging. So then that's how it stops the email. So it's not this, constant back and forth or, looking. And the reason I like that is, so in the beginning, before I utilized the client portal, what I was realizing was the email. And one time I had to write in a settlement conference brief, basically the correspondence and how this case was progressing, and it was over the course of 6 months. I wasted so much time having to look through all of these emails and finding it. Now with the secure message, it's so easy with the headlines, and you can break it apart like an email, but it's all in that one place. So that's why I say integration. Calendaring, as I said, I use the same CRM of Clio Grow and Clio management. So basically, whenever for instance, if I'm setting up an appointment, it's inputted into Clio Grow, and it automatically populates into my Clio. So everything is shown right there, and I don't have to input it all the time. So automation is the difference between non-billable and billable. And I'll say this. So for instance, if I have, like a letter and like for instructions. Instead of me copying and paste, I have it already in part of Clio, and I've set it up as a template. So basically then it's going to populate the client's name, the date, and then it goes up into the document that I've shared with them, and then they'll have access to it. So literally it takes me 1 minute versus, having to write out the person's name, saving it, and then transferring it in a PDF. So it saved me a lot. Any questions before I go into marketing? Okay. So the next thing is marketing. I just kind of look at my notes. So, okay, hold on, there's one question. So for letters, so Clio has incorporated, so the question is, what program is Clio integrating with for letters? MS Word? Yes, so I use, Microsoft Word, and basically, so they also have they show it to you, and you put it the way that you can format it, where it populates the date, it populates the name, email address, and you put it as a template. And then, so when you click on that document, you put in the matter, and then it just automatically populates, and you can turn it into a Word. And if you want to add more, you can, or if you want to just save it and just send it as is, you can do that as well. So that's what I know to the extent for Clio. Any other questions? Okay, stop me if you guys do. So marketing. That is the next thing. So one thing that I definitely want to say is, when marketing, your brand should be at the forefront. So even if you've named your law firm with your name, like mine's is Law Office of Mujda Rahim, I'm not branding it as me myself. I'm branding it my firm. So for me, and over time, my logo has changed. So it's not necessarily my initials. I've branded it into something that has nothing that has my name in it. So if I have a logo, and that's the ultimate goal. So if you think about it, it's like Facebook. We all know who Mark Zuckerberg is, but we also know the logo for Facebook. You can associate the two, but you know what they are without needing Mark to be there. And I think that's the ultimate goal. And just know that if it's difficult to separate you from your firm, you're going to have a difficult time running a firm when you're not there. Because a lot of things that I've noticed is when talking to other attorneys is, when you have a partner, two partners, or a solo, and they're the firm, typically those are the ones that are going to be met at the consult. And that client or potential new client is going to build a connection with that first person that they have that consult with. So if you have, let's say, associates, and you give them the case, they're going to be a little bit resistant. So that's what I mean about having the brand. Like, you're selling the firm, you're not selling yourself. So if you set the two apart from the beginning, and I even mean this when I say, even if you don't have staff, it's going to set the tone for later on, because there's going to be that trust, and they'll know who, your firm is and what it represents. So let me ask. So a brand. So the question is, what is a brand? I can't figure out what my brand should be. I have me, values, and my practice area. So a brand so that goes back to what your mission statement is. And this is the hardest part of any business, I will say, for me, was the mission statement. So you have your values, and so if you know what your practice area is, your value is going to typically be what your mission statement is. And over time, you're going to be incorporating a little bit more, but it does take time, and it's going to be an evolution of what your brand should be. So like I said, for instance, my logo, it started with an R. And I didn't know how to discern it myself, but I knew eventually I wanted to change it. So if you look at my logo now, that is after 3 different logos, and I still have my business cards with my old logos till this day. But it has nothing to do with my initials, and I have a slogan. So, because if you just use, for instance, if I just said Law Office of Mujrahim, right? You don't know what type of law I'm practicing. And if people aren't going to take the time to look you up, that's why you should have a kind of a slogan. So mine is Law Office of Mujrahim, a divorce and family law firm. So it's something as simple as that, because it's going to automatically let you know when you have my business card that I'm just family law. Like, I'm not doing anything else. So then that's what I mean. So, and to answer your question, it's going to take time. And you know what? You're going to have you're going to like something. And then let's say a year later, you're going to say, nope, I don't like it. And then you can toss it. But that's what I mean about the constant evolution of business. You don't want to be where you have your logo and you keep on going, not unless it's really amazing, but it's going to be constantly changing. And all you have to do is look at these Fortune 500 companies. Like, look at how much branding that they have and how much it's changed. And you can kind of see it over time. I don't know right now, but I remember in the beginning, there was a website where you can actually see the evolution of people's and businesses' website. And just to kind of look through all of that is just so amazing, because you also see how they've changed. So that's just something, when I remember it, I'll let you guys know, but I can't remember it right now. Any other questions? Okay. So that's what I mean about branding, slogan, marketing. So this was one thing in the beginning that people would say, oh, market. And for me, I was like, okay, so does that mean pay-per clicks, or what does that even mean? What I want to say that I've learned is marketing occurs every single day without you even knowing it. And I made this list. So when you go out even to the grocery store, you're marketing. Wherever it is, it's your everyday interaction with people. So sometimes, you'll see when you talk to someone, it's not like you start off and say, hi, I'm a divorce attorney, nothing like that. But you'll see this progression in conversation where you're talking about something, and then maybe the conversation might pop up of, oh, so what do you do? Okay, I'm an attorney. What type of attorney? And then, like, typically in divorce, for the responses I get is, oh, I hope I never get to see you. I'm in a loving marriage. And my response to that is, I hope I never see you either. But then I have an elevator pitch. And that's the hardest thing I will say is, if you don't have your elevator pitch, and that should be literally like 2 seconds, you're going to lose that individual. So you have to have it. Websites and blogs. So those are things that you can build a connection with, even with people that you don't see. So blogs and vlogs. So if you're into the video, you can definitely do it. Or if you want to just, be behind the scenes and write, that's fine too. Know who your audience is. So you can't write stuff that just because you think they might be interested in, it's probably not answering their questions. So one of the amazing things, or I think that I did, is when I'm writing or if I'm talking about something, I'm actually Googling what are the most common things people are looking at when they're looking for divorce. So for instance, people aren't writing, family law attorney, because a lot of times no one knows what family law encompasses, right? So if you look on Google, it will actually track for you what people are looking for. So if you claim your website, for instance, on Google, which I think everyone should do, you can actually look at what terms are being used and when you pop up. So this is what I mean about going back to return on investment. So you need to know what are the terms. I'm not saying, if you're a divorce attorney, if someone's looking at custody attorney, you're not going to make that as part of your brand. But guess what? When you start to use social media for advertising purposes, you can tailor that. So if you're looking at custody, instead of saying divorce attorney, you can write, hey, custody attorney in Walnut Creek, whatever might be the case. Social media, it's such a free tool. You don't have to spend money. And I'm not even talking about, starting with their advertising and sponsorship. Even that's cheap, but if you truly are consistent with your social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, and these new other things that are coming out, you will see that's free advertising right there, but you have to be consistent. And this is where strategic planning comes in of who are your ideal clients? So you're going to tailor those to your ideal clients. So paid advertising, I want to kind of briefly talk about that. So in the beginning, I want to say maybe into my third month of opening, I did advertise for Yelp, and I did sign up for a contract for 3 months. I will say when you open, or if you have, you're going to be constantly bombarded with calls, with emails of people selling their services, and they can really sell. I will say they can just make it sound and you're like, oh, wow, like that's so amazing. This is going to help. But this is where I'm going to say your return on investment analysis is really important. And a lot of, like for Yelp, they have it where they kind of give you the information. But one thing I will say when I did that, and I only did it for that 3 months and then I stopped. So they have, and the same thing goes for Facebook and Instagram where they have their analysis. Now, what I did was, so if you look at Yelp, if you've claimed your page and you have the app for the business, they will tell you, okay, this person clicked on your page, this person called you, this is the graph for this month. I didn't just take their word for it because some of it didn't make sense, to be quite frank with you, like a phone call, and I would look at, the call log and say, okay, that doesn't make sense. But what really helped, especially, was comparing it to my Google Analytics for my website. They didn't match up. So for me, after that 3 months, I didn't see much coming out of it. The calls, they were coming, but it wasn't so much, where I thought I was paying sufficient. But do know, in order for Google ads, especially Google, I will say, to work, you have to spend a lot of money. So if you're not at that position, or if you don't want to advertise, that's okay, but you need to focus more on your website or on your social media where you don't have to pay for anything. So then the other thing is networking. Bar associations, you have Chamber of Commerce, BNI. So these are the things. Okay, so there's a question. So I'm going to take a pause to read this. Okay, so the question is, can you explain again how to find the most popular search terms on Google? So what you can do is just type it in. Go on Google, say most commonly looked up terms for divorce attorney, for instance. BNI is business. So BNI, it's basic. Okay. Sorry, I'm like jumping because 2 questions came in. So that's what you can do for searching on Google. The other thing is when you do claim your Google page, they will give you what people are looking for. So that's how, does that make sense? If it does, you can ask me. Yes, thank you. Thank you so BNI is Business Networking International. So BNI, it's a group where you meet, I believe it's every week, and then you also have to kind of do a one-on-one. So I went to one of their functions to get an idea of what it is. So the first session is for free, but by the time I went, I was pretty much busy and I couldn't make that time commitment. But it is something that I do want to touch upon is the way to network. Yes, so someone has already said BNI has been awesome for their business. So yes, so one thing about networking is it's such a broad term, but it's hard. This is where it's a lot of trial. But what you have to know for networking is you have to build that meaningful relationship. So it's not enough to hand your business card, follow up with an email, go out for coffee once, and that's it. You really have to work at this. So people are going to refer you when they know who you are, one, and also have an idea of your work. So, when people come to me now, when we're doing networking, coffee, I'm thinking, they always come and they're like, for instance, like let's say financial advisors or realtors, for me, I'm not going to put your name on the list just because you say, hey, you know, I help divorced couples. I don't know you enough. And it's the same for me. People are not going to say, okay, so you're a divorce attorney, I'm going to automatically put you on my referral list. Even if they say it, I mean, it's not going to happen. So I think, you know, things like BNI is going to help you if you have the time commitment for it. And one thing I will say for Chamber of Commerce, the best thing that someone said is it's how much you put into it. So it's not enough to just go into these networking events and just go and, you know, just introduce yourself and then it's cricket. So it's how much you participate. So that's a big thing for networking. The other thing is your clients, opposing party, opposing counsel, and family and friends. So that is a form of marketing. So for instance, okay, let me pause for this question. Yeah, okay. So those are people who are watching you. You're always being watched. Clients are excellent sources of referrals. They will, in the context of divorces, a lot of them, you know, come back for custody and visitation to modify. Opposing parties, I've had someone come who, you know, who was an opposing party in the case, and they referred their friends because they liked how it was handled. Opposing counsel. So one thing I want to say about that, for instance, I myself, when it comes to my kids' schools, I do not take on any parents or any teachers, even though it's the best place to, you know, market myself, but I don't. But I do watch other opposing counsel, see how their work ethic is, see how they are, and I will refer those sources out. So it doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't watching and they won't refer it. So as part of your intake, you should always know, so this is what I talked about earlier, you need to know where your calls are coming from. So I want to say one thing, just because you're getting the calls, that's one step. The second step that you need is when those potential new clients come in. Those are two separate steps, and they're two different functions of its own. Because if you're getting the calls, that's great. But if you're not retaining, then something's not working right there. So it should always be reviewed. So when it comes to outsourcing websites, SEO, and social media, so for instance, I started out with my own website. Now I've outsourced it. My social media, things like that, SEOs are part of my marketing. I've outsourced it. But before I did it myself. If you enjoy it, keep on doing it. If you don't have the resources to outsource, then you have to do it. You should create a content and plan it out. So this is not every month you're going to just sit and write and then you're going to publish it. Ideally, you should take one weekend and literally write out your content for the year. And you need to schedule it. So before, as I said, so you have Buffer and you have Hootsuite. If you're that one user, you can easily put it up. And what's amazing about those is it triggers automatically to your LinkedIn. It triggers automatically to your Facebook, your Instagram, and you have Canva, which is another source that you can basically have the photos for you and basically schedule it, and it will schedule it every month. So one thing I want everyone to be careful and to understand is, as solo practitioners or as mid-sized firms, you don't have the resources of a Fortune 500 where you can do the research, but there are those Fortune 500 companies who have paid those millions of dollars to go into the research. Use it to your advantage. So one thing that I realized was, if you're posting at the wrong time and people are looking at your social media and it's not the time, guess what? They're going to automatically use that against you. It's implicit. It's not something that it's active, but if you're not posting at the right time, it's going to have a certain look and you're going to automatically be canceled out. So know when a good time is to post. The other thing is, if you're outsourcing, understand the concept. Like I said, there's a lot of good games where they say, hey, if you hire us, it's going to be an increase of 500%. And you're like, and if you don't understand what the right questions are to ask, then you are going to be hiring someone and not getting the results, and it's a lot of money. The other thing is that's for free is join Facebook groups. So I'm part of a group or many groups on Facebook, and it's tailored to solo attorneys or mid-firm attorneys, depending on size. And just to kind of hear it and get new ideas and concepts that you can implement, it's a great place to go ahead and do that. And I will answer this question. Okay, I am almost running out of time. So this is the last slide. You never know who can be a source of referral. So don't let that bias impact your decision. You know, an instance is, for instance, you know, I had this one client who didn't have money, but, you know, I worked on a payment plan with her, and the results, she loved the results, you know, despite the odds against her. And I literally got 20 referrals just out of her. And if I would have cut her out and didn't work with her, I could have lost those 20 referrals right there. Also know that not all clients should be taken off. Have your elevator pitch in hand. Know you're being watched. And as I said, in order for referrals to work, you have to build those meaningful relationships. And that is all the time that I know I have right now. Any questions? Okay, so that's answered. So what I mean by elevator pitch is, how are you going to describe your business in 5 seconds? Now, it's not going to be enough for me to say, well, I'm a divorce and family law attorney, and I help families transition. Like, that's too long and it's too verbal. It has to be something quick, within five seconds. And it takes a long time to work on it. It's the hardest thing, I will say, that I do. And I will say till this day, I'm constantly tweaking it. Should you focus on one area of the law? I have 3 areas of law, but should I limit? I will say this answer. So sometimes it's good to start with a niche and with one area, and then slowly incorporate other areas. So in your situation, if you have 3 areas of law, which area, first of all, the question is, do they all overlap with one another? For instance, divorce can kind of go hand in hand with wills and trust, right? Because they overlap in that context. So if your areas of practices do overlap, then what you can do is focus on where you're getting the most clients, and then kind of build that. And as the trust builds in you and people know who you are, they're going to start, you can slowly incorporate that into there. So if you don't have to, so if you want to, for purposes of branding, if you're going to do 3 practices area all at once, and if they overlap, then you need to think of a good logo and a slogan that's going to incorporate all of that without it being too quick. So like that logo should represent what you're doing. So does Clio encrypt email communications? So they do encrypt their secure messaging. So they don't call it email, but they call it secure messaging. Yes, they do. So for me, my email, that's why I always guide my clients, use the client portal for communications, and that's the best way to go. Any other questions?
I think we have one more question that we missed earlier, and the question was, will the California law regarding independent contractors affect solo attorneys who want to contract work, like the legal research example that you gave?
Okay, so I was a little bit concerned about the AB5, the Dynamex case that you said. So if you look into it, legal professionals or any profession kind of that falls within the context of needing licensing from the state are an exception. So the Dynamex ABC test does not apply, and you fall back to the Brillo. So it doesn't impact us for independent contracting.
Okay, we're going to take one more question, and I know we're running out of time, but if you have any other questions after this, you can email me directly, and then I can get it to Muda. The last question is, do you need to provide malpractice insurance for of-counsel attorneys who work with you?
So prior to opening my practice, when I had an of-counsel position, my employer did pay for that. To err on the side of caution, I personally would pay for of-counsel attorney if it's a consistent thing. But if I'm contracting out, like let's just say a few projects, I'm not gonna, and if they're behind the scene, I'm not gonna pay for their malpractice insurance.
Great. Well, we're out of time now. Thank you everyone for joining us. I will be sending out the PowerPoint presentation, and then at that time you can respond with any other questions you have for our speaker. Please tune in tomorrow at noon with, we have another webinar with Jen Lee, who will be talking about finding clients and how to convince them to pay you for advice. So you can tune in with us tomorrow for that session. Thank you so much.